Hello, true duelists. It's YGO Strat's Yu-Gi-Oh! Single Card History, where I'm going to be talking about some of the cards that have impacted Yu-Gi-Oh! Throughout the years, and some of the others that didn't. Today's card, it's not instant ramen, it's instant fusion. Instant fusion was first released as a lowly peasant rare back in 2006 when it debuted in CyberDark Impact. It wouldn't stay a peasant rare for too long though, with multiple reprints and rarity bumps over the years, such as an ultra rare printing in 2012's Raw Yellow Mega Pack, a super rare printing in 2017's Fusion Enforcers, as well as an ultimate rare print in the same year from OTS Pack 4. For time on the ban list here in the TCG, the card was unlimited at 3, all the way from its release in 2006 up until the April 2020 ban list, where it was preemptively hit to 1 as one of the adjustments made to bring in the Master Rule Sori changes and make not Link monsters become playable from the extra deck. Since then, the card has remained at 1 ever since, as of my making this video. A normal spell card, its effect reads: pay 1,000 life points, special summon one level 5 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, but it cannot attack, also it is destroyed during the end phase. This is treated as a fusion summon. You can only activate 1 instant fusion per turn. The craziest part of this card is that it's still legal. Like, at all. Before even doing the research for this, I can think of more than one instance in the game's history where this card being banned probably would have been for the better. And yet, here we are. And also, now you know the slight bias I will be holding throughout this video. That's just preemptive warning, friends. I haven't been able to find a ton of information on this card from when it first released back in 2006, being truthful, but I do know that CyberDark Impact released 2 months after the banning of Thousand Eyes Restrict, which in 2006 was probably the best target, or at very least one of the better ones for this card to get out. Or, you know, it would have been. From jump, Instant Fusion was seen as a neat Monarch tech from what I've been able to find, although competitively I can't find much proof of that. The general consensus is that if you're going to be using a spell card to get a monster to tribute, why not just use Brain Control or Soul Exchange and get rid of an opponent's monster outright instead of paying 1,000 of your life points? Matter of fact, most of the opinions I can find on the card from 2006 or so are about this card being the final nail in the coffin to get Thousand Eyes Restrict banned, and that this was a mostly useless callback to Magical Scientist of sorts, a card that most agreed ruined the game and had not been missed. This review of the card from Pojo in particular is great. If you aren't instantly satisfied, don't play it. I don't even know if I disagree with that, but my god, what beautiful wording. It's safe to assume things changed up, however, in 2008 because Duelist Genesis would give the game synchro monsters, requiring a tuner and non-tuner to make your new on-demand boss monster from the extra deck. And by normal summoning a tuner and using instant fusion, you could open up any number of synchro plays. A level 3 tuner and a level 5 fusion could get you a Stardust Dragon going first, or maybe a level 2 tuner and a level 5 fusion could get you Black Rose if you were going second. In the earlier Synchro era is when this would have been most viable, as the more good generic synchros we got, the more people might prefer to play them over the functionally vanilla fusion monsters that Instant Fusion offered. Still, I wasn't really able to find a ton in the way of topping decks that were playing the card in the Synchro era. The earliest recorded tops I can find using Instant Fusion would come in 2012, 6 years after it's released in wind-up decks. For much of the same reason you might use a fusion monster as synchro material, the card offered the same function as free material for an Xyz summon. When the goal of your deck is to hand loop the opponent, it's pretty easy to justify the extra deck slot on Fusionist or Dragonist the Wicked Knight, because Party Boat only needs 2 level 3s to summon, and getting that out can rip 3 cards from the opponent's hand without trouble. This is also when we start to see the card pop up for Synchro Abuse well, at least again from what I can find, with decks like Teleport Karkuri playing the card and most often summoning Cybersaurus for free material to synchro off with. Karkuri synchro monsters can all summon out a Karkuri from the deck on summon, meaning that instant fusion and 1 synchro is suddenly 2 synchros, practically speaking. This is the sort of mentality that follows the card for some years, filling a niche role in some decks to use as free extension of sorts to help make bigger and better boards. Hell, in some builds, such as Simon He's Mermail deck from 2013, it was even sided in. He did play the fusion monsters in the extra deck regardless, but in games 2 and 3 he would use it to help make an easier dweller for specific matchups that called for it, such as in the mirror match or facing against Dark Worlds. The rationale was that it was great in game 2 to help OTK or to make dweller, which was matchup dependent enough to side in instant fusion rather than rely on it in game 1. As said, this is the trend for some time. Between the Synchro and Xyz era, Konami didn't really make many good fusion archetypes, and certainly not ones that could readily abuse instant fusion. So the other decks I'll give a shout out to at this point in instant fusion's life are things like Madolche, because my buddy Adam used it to make MX Saber Invoker, or Leviair, and it would annoy the hell out of me that I felt like I was ultimately losing because I couldn't stop fucking Fusionist from hitting the field. If you want to see the exact deck list from that time, that deck list is still on my channel to this day, and is in fact one of the worst videos on this entire website. But hey, for that one dude who wants to see a random scrub Madolche deck list from 2015, I got you. And then of course, the other deck that's truly worth mentioning, the first modern fuck you break my board style of deck, Infernity. Infernity went all in on making giant boards abusing copies of Lavalval Chain and any and all level 4 monsters to summon it. Instant Fusion was great for not only getting a free monster to make Lavalval Chain with, but it also was a spell, meaning that it could be set before doing any other sort of plays that were better to make going first, allowing for players to summon and use the effects of cards such as Infernity Necromancer or even Archfiend, and use their effects fully without having that monster in your hand, and then summon it afterwards with Instant Fusion. And hell, if you drew 2 of it, it was the same thing. You can just set it and use it to go off again on the second turn. Just how good was Infernity at doing all of this? Well, it won Worlds in 2014, so I suppose we could say it earns the title of respectable. But by this point, we ultimately reached 2015, and 2 very big things happened by this point. The first is the introduction of decks that could fusion summon and actually stand a chance, be it immediately on release or gradually over time, namely Shaddoll and Fluffle. But Shaddoll didn't need instant fusion to abuse its extra deck, and while Fluffle would play it in the Cosmo era, it's not exactly a staple of the deck in the grand scheme of that deck's history. Instead, there was another even bigger thing from 2015 that saw this card explode in usage. Not a fusion deck, but a fusion monster. One so good, some players would begin to call to ban instant fusion. Elder Entity Norden. The monster I credit with being responsible for my best thumbnail to date came out in the Megatins in 2015, and when I say that it was in damn near every deck, I'm not even being that hyperbolic. You'll notice a small bump in 2015 when looking at this graph of the card's usage from YugiOhTopDecks.com, showing it does spike up, and that's because instant fusion and any level 4 monster in your graveyard can make any 2 material rank 4 in the game, simply by adding instant fusion in the main deck and a copy or 2 of Norden in the extra, and you now have a lovely little extra bit of fluff to your end board or OTK. This fact was only made better with the addition of the Performage engine in the game, a series of level 4 clowns, literally, with fantastic effects to either summon themselves out or search other clowns, making it so good in a number of decks as just a lovely little engine. Namely, Shaddoll as a means to have great light monsters to send to the grave to summon out Construct, and in Necroz to make rank 4s, be it for OTKs or making Emeralds to put those resources back in the deck. Granted, the likes of BA or Klee or Ritual Beast weren't playing that engine for the obvious reason of not needing generic rank 4s, but Shaddoll and Necroz saw a sizable boost in power from it. Not that all of it mattered for too much longer anyways, because the November 2015 ban list saw fit to bring the end to the Duelist Alliance format, and with January 2016 releasing Breakers of Shadow, we had a new Tier 0 threat on our hands. Performage Performapals, or Pepe, was Pendulum's most broken state in the entirety of the TCG, at least in my opinion, and the deck was best known for its strong boards of Cyber Dragon Infinity, Traptrix Rafflesia, easy OTKs using Performage Trapeze Magician, and its ability to go like plus 10 without even really trying. This deck too would use instant fusion to make Norden, or at least some builds did. Pepe was hit almost immediately after taking 29 of the top 32 slots at YCS Atlanta, only 3 weeks after the release of Breakers of Shadow. So no best version of it was definitively established, it was killed too early. Still, some decks that played at YCS Atlanta were playing Norden because an extra dweller on top of the standard end board was hardly a bad thing. And despite being in so many decks to cheat out Norden, Konami would ultimately opt to hit Norden instead of instant fusion, a case of hitting the problem rather than the cards around the problem, or a meaningless hit because instant fusion already has a hard once per turn, and they could still play 3 of it to get access to the one of Norden with the same sort of solid effects even after this hit. You can go ahead ahead and tell me which of those is more likely, but I feel like those are really the only two opinions you can have about it. Draco Pals would ultimately continue to play this card, the remnants of Pepe after that emergency ban list in February of 2016, and the inevitable April 2016 ban list. And because it's a single card history, I now get to show you a Draco Pal list playing the Dark Draco Pal engine, because I'm pretty sure at this point I'm obligated to do so. Look at those dark monsters. Other decks playing at this time, however, do include the likes of Extra Deck Monarchs, who while not always being a staple in their builds, at least didn't play it for Norden when they did. With the April 2016 ban list giving us back Thousand-Eyes Strict, the dreaded hypothetical play from 2006 became real 10 years later, with Thousand Eyes being usable in the deck as a way to eat up an opponent's monster and to double his free tribute fodder for the deck. This list in particular also played Panzer Dragon as a level 5 to make Xyz plays with the Prime Monarch, and even played Dragonist the Wicked Knight in case they opened Takatomborg but not Terratop to get their Speedroid engine, live and going. From this point on though, its most common use is as the rank 4 extender to abuse the single copy of Norden allowed, in any deck that played 4s really. So here you go, have a look at a Brilliant Lightsworn deck too, because wow, there's 2 purple cards in the extra deck. That's crazy. That's crazy. Where Instant Fusion peaks, however, is in 2017. Just under a year after Norden's limiting, because January 2017 would bring us Raging Tempest, and Raging Tempest gave us the Zoodiacs. Just for a change of pace, a deck that used level 4 monsters to abuse the rank 4 toolbox, all with its own lovely rank 4 powerhouses like Broadbull and Didnt, to give the deck its own insane consistency and reliable disruption. So to no shock, they played Instant Fusion to make Norden across multiple variants as the format would grow. Pure Zoodiac could play the most generic outs and hand traps to out and disrupt boards, with the most room for techs like Enemy Controller and My Body as a Shield, and of course Instant Fusion, because one extra little rank 4 can do oh so much. True Draco Zoo was another popular variant in the format, with players opting to include a True Draco engine to get out Masterpiece, a card who could be tributed by using monsters, continuous spells, or continuous traps, and depending on what was tributed to summon it would become immune to those effects. So a monster and spell card tributed to summon it meant it was immune to all monsters and all spells, something that would be difficult for most pure Zoo decks to out. And alternatively, the third option that rose in popularity was Kaiju Zoo, which ran Zoodiacs and a Kaiju engine, because tributing over Masterpiece that the opponent had spent resources summoning out was oh so satisfying, and even if you weren't playing against True Draco Zoo, you were probably playing against a mirror match, or a Pure Zoo, which meant you could tribute their Trident and remove some of their disruptions from them regardless. All 3 of these variants played Instant Fusion more often than not though, all for the same reasons, because Norden can make Broadbull, and that leads to any zoo, or it can make Emerald, which means you can recycle zoos. And on the off chance you were playing True Draco, you could get yourself a Dweller to shut off their grave effects. Hell, even non-Zoodiac focused decks were often playing the zoo engine at this time, and as such had Instant Fusion for Norden as part of their strategy. Take Infernoid for example. Hell, there's even lists not playing a zoo engine that are still playing Norden just to get access to one of their 2 level 4s that they were playing regardless. So it should come as no shock that at this point Konami finally banned Norden, and with Norden banned on the June 2017 ban list, coupled with the introduction of Link Monsters and Master Rule 4 in the TCG in July of the same year, Instant Fusion plummets in use for a little bit, because the extra monster zone is precious, and a single fusion monster is less important than the easy to summon Link monsters that we had just gotten. But inevitably, as time went on and Links became easier to abuse and just stronger in general, we see a shift in favor of this lovely little ramen cup, because once we get to 2018, FTKs become as common as they are annoying. Take for example Pendulum FTK, which would use Instant Fusion to cheat out Lyralisk Independent Nightingale, which when its effect is copied by say Supreme King Starving Dragon, can allow the Supreme King Starving Dragon to burn you for 4,000 points of damage. Meaning if you get out 2 Supreme Kings, it's game. And considering all you need to do to get out 2 Supreme King Starving Dragons is have 4 Dark Pendulum monsters, it was pretty easy to do. It was even played in the likes of Goki as well, purely to make MX Saber Invoker, often without even having to use the normal summon. Because Invoker could get out a Goki from the deck before being linked off for Isold, it meant that you could use Isold to summon another Goki from the deck with its effect, all on top of the search that the Goki going to the graveyard gets you when you summon your Isold out. All to lead to the standard end board of extra linking the opponent and not letting them play Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's 2018 and if we aren't FTKing, we're functionally FTKing, baby. It just fucking sucks. As we enter TOS format though, and Firewall Dragon gets put out behind a shed like it should have been before, Instant Fusion comes to find home in some sporadic decks. Not unpopular was its use in Thunder Dragon, using it to summon out Kaminari Attack as a free Thunder-type fusion monster that could be banished to summon out Thunder Dragon Titan, as a way of cheating it out with its alternate summoning condition, so to say. And still at this point, it wasn't uncommon to still use the tried and true Thousand Eyes Restrict play that continued to be a known and somewhat popular play to break boards going second at this time. Decks like Prank Kids would play it as well to cheat out Rocket Ride, more often than not allowing players to use its effect to tribute itself and revive 2 Prank Kids from the graveyard, which could be used to make link plays and abuse that Prank Kid lovely fact that all of them just float into more Prank Kids. But beyond these niche uses, for lack of a better term, this is Instant Fusion's role for a good while. It becomes a good card going second to help break boards using Thousand Eyes Restrict, and in specific decks allows some neat plays, like Thunder Dragon and Prank Kids. As 2020 and COVID format takes hold, the card at long last goes to 1 though, in order to adjust for the new Master Rule change allowing Fusion, Synchro, and Xyz monsters to be summoned without the need of link arrows. Still, the card's usage does fall off a little bit outside of things like Prank Kids, as decks like Adamancipator and Eldritch take the spotlight. Instant Fusion's next real big spike in play would ultimately come in 2022 after Power the Elements dropped, giving us the Tearlaments archetype. And most notably for this card, a level 5 fusion monster named Tearlament Kit Kalos. Kit Kalos on summon can add a Tearlament card from your deck to your hand, or send a Tearlament card from your deck to the graveyard, allowing players to start a Tearlament combo by itself on summon, or even search a card like Soliek or Crime to give more strength to their end boards. It didn't help that Kit Kalos can also send itself to the grave by its own effect to summon out a Tearlament from your hand or grave, and in doing so will mill 5 cards from the top of your deck to further get plays going. This play was powerful enough in decks like Danger Tearlaments, which was arguably, top 2 of its format, but not number 2. But even after Danger Tearlaments fell out of favor and we got the Ishizu cards, the Instant Fusion into Kit Kalos play was as strong as it had ever been, and stayed a staple in the deck for many people just because it's pay 1,000 life points, get full combo. All for the skill of having opened the one of Instant Fusion in your hand. Hilariously, even after being insane in a second format, they once again opted to ban the Fusion monster and not this card. Not that I'm saying Kit Kalos didn't deserve the ban, but crazy. As of now, while I'm recording this video, the card isn't seeing a ton of use in top decks. Kashtira doesn't play it, Branded doesn't need to make use of it because it plays high-level fusions and not low-level ones, and while things like Prank Kids are most surely still playing it, they haven't been relevant for some time. Rip to the kitty. At current, it's still that same sort of board breaker it's been for years, with its ever-reliable use with Thousand Eyes Restrict, or as a solid card to get full combo in one-off decks like the previously mentioned Prank Kids, or even in some decks like B-Troopers, who for some godless reason have 2 fusion monsters, and the new level 5 is like utterly insane with Instant Fusion, which is most of what this card has become. Instant Fusion cheats out a monster for the low cost of 1,000 life points, and it treats it as a fusion summon at that, meaning the monsters it summons can be revived if they go to the graveyard, and if they have effects that activate on fusion summon, they do trigger under this card. This has made it fully future-proof, being exponentially more broken in 2023 than it was in its release in 2006, nearly 2 decades ago. It also leaves itself to become a problem whenever a level 5 or lower fusion monster is printed with an even halfway decent effect, be it generic ones like Thousand Eyes or Millennium Eyes, or in archetype ones like Kit Kalos. It's at a point where even if it isn't a problem now as I'm making this, or maybe when you're watching this in the future, it's only a matter of time before it becomes a problem again. As is so often the case in Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's a when and not an if, and that's not what we like to hear. Overall, Instant Fusion is a very powerful, very generic spell card that allows players to abuse the fusion mechanic and get out powerful fusion monsters for free, practically speaking. From generic purposes like summoning Thousand Eyes to help break a board, or Millennium Eyes to help buff against hand traps, the implications generically are strong, and when used in fusion-focused decks, they can be anywhere from insanely broken in Tearlaments in the strongest of cases, and even just insanely good for the deck, like in B-Troopers if you want a less meta-dominant example. It's been banned in Master Duel, and I won't be shocked to see it banned in the OCG or TCG anytime soon. That's just what happens when a card exists that lets you cheat out cards with no real detriment. And on the copium side, they've already given us Ready Fusion here to replace it. So if you ask me, it's only going to be a matter of time until this card gets banned. And until then, it's going to be a very strong one of and a downright staple that allows for some very powerful boards in the meantime. And so that's our look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Single card history, Instant Fusion. Stay tuned for our next video, and feel free to suggest some cards to review or what type of video you'd like to see. Don't forget to like, and as always, subscribe to YGO Strats to impress your smokin' Italian wife, and so you too can be a true duelist.